50 tons, enough weight to crush a house, lay scattered across the forest floor, too massive for men or horses to budge, yet somehow these ancient logs rode the rails to build America's cities. No modern cranes, no steel giants, just timber, steam, and a handful of men gambling with physics and their lives. How did American loggers conquer forces 1,000 times their own strength? The answer begins with an invention born of desperation and bold engineering. A single old-growth log, freshly cut in the Pacific Northwest, could stretch 40 feet long and measure 8 feet thick. With bark and moisture weighing it down, that single trunk might tip the scales at 40 or even 50 tons, more than a fully loaded semi-truck barreling down the highway. The numbers stagger the imagination. 100,000 pounds of solid wood resting on the forest floor, waiting to be moved. Human strength barely registers on this scale. A strong logger might shift 200 pounds with a pry bar, but against a log like this, it's like pushing a mountain. Even teams of horses or oxen, harnessed together, could only drag these giants slowly along the ground. Lifting them clear off the earth and onto a rail car 4 feet above the landing was an entirely different challenge. No amount of sweat or muscle could hoist such a load. The bottleneck was absolute. Crews could cut and haul, but when it came time to load, the log might as well have been welded to the ground. Ramps splintered under the weight. Gin poles, once enough for smaller timber, snapped or sank into the mud. The sheer mass of these logs forced a new kind of thinking, one that went far beyond brute force. To move America's biggest trees, loggers needed something that could multiply their power hundreds of times, bridging the gap between raw nature and human ambition. If you've ever wondered how American ingenuity solved problems that seem physically impossible, subscribe to see more stories like this. 2 towers, each one a solid length of Douglas fir, 60 to 80 feet long and sometimes 3 feet thick at the base, stood braced in a giant A above the logging landing. At their peak, 50 feet in the air, a cluster of heavy steel pulleys hung like the heart of a machine. From here, a steel cable as thick as a man's thumb stretched down to the ground. Its other end wound tight around the drum of a steam donkey engine. The boiler, running at 150 to 200 pounds per square inch, fed steam to pistons that spun the drum with relentless force. When the donkey puncher engaged the clutch, the cable snapped taut, running up and over the pulleys before dropping down to a set of loading tongs, 6 to 8 feet of forged steel, jaws open and ready to bite into the wood. The geometry of the A-frame was no accident. By lifting the cable high above the ground, the rig created a vertical lift path, allowing the log to rise straight up instead of dragging. The spread of the legs, anchored by guy wires, fanned out in every direction, countered the crushing downward force and the wild side-to-side swings that could topple the whole structure. Each component was sized for the job. Main cables an inch or more in diameter, loading blocks weighing hundreds of pounds, every link and pin oversized to handle the shock of a 50-ton log suddenly shifting its weight. Mechanical advantage was built into every part of the system. The cable threaded through multi-sheave blocks, multiplying the pulling force of the steam engine. With the right setup, a donkey engine exerting 20,000 pounds of pull could lift and swing a log 5 times that weight, hoisting it clear off the landing and over the waiting rail car. The A-frame didn't just move logs, it turned steam and steel into a force that could overcome gravity itself, making the impossible look routine. Joaquin Alvarez's crew gathered at the landing, boots sinking into mud streaked with sawdust. Each man knew his part without a word. The whistle punk watched for the signal, hand wrapped around the cord. One short, then a long blast. The code for the start of the lift cut through the morning air, sharp and unmistakable. Every logger on the landing had memorized these patterns, some learning them before they learned English. In this camp, men from Galicia, Finland, and the Yakama Nation worked side by side, their only common language the rhythm of the whistle and the tension in the line. Joaquin stepped forward, tongs in hand, and found the balance point along the log's rough surface. He set the jaws deep into the wood, then raised his arm. The whistle punk relayed the signal, and the donkey puncher eased steam into the engine. The cable groaned, tightening with a sound like a live wire, and the log began to lift, bark flaking off as it cleared the ground. Tagline men flanked the log, hands gripping ropes, ready to control the swing. Each move demanded split-second timing. Too soon, and the log spun. Too late, and it drifted out of reach. The donkey puncher watched the cable spool, eyes locked on the rising weight. Every man listened for the next whistle, too short, one long to hold, or a rapid blast for danger. In this choreography, mistakes had no place. Each lift was a test of trust and nerve, a silent agreement that every man on the crew would hold his line and know the code. The work was relentless, the rhythm unbroken, and the only thing louder than the whistle was the knowledge of what could happen if anyone missed a beat. In June 1914, the crew at Gifford Creek faced a log that dwarfed anything they'd seen. A single Douglas fir, nearly 70 feet long, estimated at over 70 tons. The camp's foreman, Sam Whitaker, had measured the trunk twice, pacing off its length with a surveyor's chain. That morning, the air hung thick with rain and steam. The main cable, already frayed from weeks of use, was all that stood between the crew and disaster. John P. Miller, the whistle punk, scribbled a line in his diary, wood shattering like glass, men being driven into the ground like nails. The lift began with the usual signals. Tension built fast as the donkey puncher fed steam, the cable singing under the load. Halfway up, the tongs slipped. The mainline snapped back, recoiling with a force that no man could dodge. The log crashed down, splintering the landing. 3 men died instantly, pinned under a mass of timber and steel. The rest of the crew scattered, some never returning to camp. Despite the carnage, the operation resumed within days. The company had invested nearly $10,000 in the A-frame, steam donkey, and rigging, a sum that could buy a house in town, but here, it was sunk into machinery that had to pay for itself in timber. Every lost day meant dozens of logs left on the ground, wages unpaid, contracts unfulfilled. The risk became a line item, tallied against the promise of profit. As long as the math worked, the work continued, no matter the cost, in blood or bone. In September 1927, a crowd gathered on the Hoquiam waterfront to watch a machine unlike anything seen in the timber camps. A hydraulic log loader, powered by pumps and steel cylinders instead of steam and cables, rolled up beside the rail car. With only 3 men on the crew, it extended its boom, clamped onto a log weighing more than 50 tons, and lifted it cleanly into the air. No whistles, no taglines, no men darting beneath swinging timber, just the steady hum of hydraulics and a single operator at the controls. Old hands who had spent decades under the A-frame watched as the log settled onto the car in minutes, not half an hour. The loader's precision and speed left no doubt. The era of steam, and 10-man crews was ending. Machines like this would soon make the old ways obsolete. A handful of A-frame loaders still stand, silent among the relics of old rail yards and logging museums. Their timbers, sometimes 80 feet long and nearly 3 feet thick, are weathered but intact, a testament to the brute engineering that once ruled the landings. Marilyn Green, a curator who has spent years cataloging these giants, runs her hand along the grain and points out the original steel hardware, each piece stamped with numbers for load calculations. The Pacific Lumber Company manual from 1909, still preserved in the museum's archives, details how every pole and guy wire was chosen with a safety factor of 4. No guesswork, just math and muscle. Even now, standing beneath the peak where loading blocks once hung, the scale is overwhelming. These structures are more than artifacts. They are living evidence of a time when moving a 50-ton log was both a science and an act of faith. The forests are quieter now, but the scale of what was moved and what it cost still shapes the world we build. Every modern crane traces its lineage to these risks and inventions. Progress owes a debt to raw courage. The question is, what impossible problem will we solve next?